When we think of Adolf Hitler's final days, one image comes to mind: the Führer, trapped underground in his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin as the Red Army closed in. But Hitler was not alone. Around him were generals, secretaries, bodyguards, and family members of his closest allies, some clinging to hope, others resigned to doom. So, who exactly was in Hitler's bunker when he died on April 30th, 1945? Let's go back to those final weeks to understand the cast of people who shared in the collapse of the Third Reich. The bunker itself, known as the Führerbunker, was a reinforced underground shelter completed in 1944, located about 30 feet beneath the Chancellery Gardens. It was cramped, dimly lit, and smelled of damp concrete, smoke, and exhaustion. By mid-April, as Soviet artillery rained down on Berlin, Hitler and his inner circle withdrew into this claustrophobic refuge. Among the most prominent figures present was Eva Braun, Hitler's longtime mistress. She had joined him in the bunker on April 15, 1945, refusing to flee Berlin despite offers of escape. She insisted that her place was by Hitler's side, no matter the consequences. In those final hours, she would become his wife, marrying him on April 29th, the day before their joint suicide. Another constant presence was Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's devoted propaganda minister. Goebbels, his wife Magda, and their 6 young children moved into the bunker in late April. Goebbels never wavered in his loyalty to Hitler, declaring that he would not outlive his leader. Magda, equally fanatical, shared this fate. Their children, tragically, would be poisoned by their parents before the collapse was complete. Hitler's private staff also crowded the underground complex. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary and head of the Nazi Party Chancellery, was there. He acted as a gatekeeper, controlling access to Hitler, drafting his political testament, and attempting in vain to negotiate paths of escape as the Red Army closed in. Then there were Hitler's secretaries, Traudl Junge, Gerda Christian, and Elsa Kruger. These women typed Hitler's final will and testament on the night of April 29th. Junge later recalled the surreal calmness of that moment, knowing they were typing the last words of a dying regime. Among the military staff in the bunker was General Wilhelm Burgdorf, Hitler's chief adjutant, and General Hans Krebs, chief of the Army General Staff. Krebs, a veteran officer, would play a tragic role on May 1st, when he tried to negotiate Berlin's surrender to the Soviets, but was rebuffed. Alongside them was General Wilhelm Mohnke, the officer in charge of defending the government quarter of Berlin, tasked with holding off the Soviets for as long as possible. Also present was SS Gruppenführer Johann Rattenhuber, the commander of Hitler's personal security detail, and Otto Günsche, Hitler's adjutant. Günsche was the man directly responsible for handling Hitler's body after his suicide. He poured gasoline over the corpses of Hitler and Eva Braun and set them ablaze in the Chancellery garden. Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, had fled earlier in April, but others remained. Dr. Werner Hase, another physician, and Dr. Ernst Günther Schenk, an SS doctor, were in Berlin during the final days. Schenk later provided valuable testimony about the bunker atmosphere, describing the mixture of fatalism and routine as the end drew near. Hitler's cook, Constanze Manziali, also lived in the bunker. She had been in his service since 1943, preparing his strict vegetarian meals. She remained until the very end, later disappearing during the Soviet occupation, her fate unknown. And of course, there were the guards and aides who formed the support staff: Heinz Linger, Hitler's valet, and Rochus Misch, his telephone operator. Misch was one of the last surviving witnesses of the bunker, living until 2013, and he recalled hearing the gunshot that ended Hitler's life. The mood inside the bunker was tense and surreal. Above ground, Berlin was collapsing. Soviet artillery shells rocked the city, and food supplies dwindled. Yet underground, meals were still served, records were still typed, and Hitler continued to hold briefings that had long since lost all meaning. On April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday, the bunker was full of activity. It was his last public appearance, as military leaders came to pay their respects. Afterward, most generals departed to attempt to command what was left of the Wehrmacht. Only a few stayed behind. Hitler knew the war was lost, but refused to leave the city, insisting he would remain in Berlin to the end. Over the next 10 days, as the Soviets encircled the capital, the bunker became more crowded and tense. Hitler issued orders to armies that no longer existed, railing at his generals for failures that were beyond their control. His health was failing, and he appeared shrunken, trembling, and unstable. On April 22nd, during a furious outburst, he admitted openly that the war was lost. It was then that some staff began seeking ways out, yet many remained, bound by loyalty, fear, or simply the inability to escape through Soviet lines. By April 28th, Hitler received confirmation of Heinrich Himmler's betrayal, news that his longtime ally was attempting to negotiate with the Western Allies. Enraged, Hitler saw it as the ultimate treason. That same night, he dictated his final political testament, condemning Himmler and Goering, reaffirming his hatred of Jews, and naming successors. He married Eva Braun in a small ceremony held within the bunker, with Goebbels and Bormann as witnesses. The following day, April 29th, the group gathered for a quiet celebration. Hitler and Eva Braun held a modest wedding breakfast. Later that day, the secretaries typed Hitler's last will and testament. In it, he appointed Goebbels as Reich Chancellor, Admiral Karl Dönitz as president, and Bormann as party minister. By April 30th, the Red Army was only a few hundred meters from the Reich Chancellery. The bunker shook with each artillery impact. That morning, Hitler held a final conference. He bid farewell to his staff, shaking hands and thanking them for their service. Many broke into tears. After lunch, around 3:30 p.m., Hitler and Eva Braun withdrew into his private study. Witnesses included Otto Günscher, Heinz Linger, and several aides waiting in the hallway. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. Inside, Hitler had shot himself through the right temple, while Eva Braun took cyanide. Their bodies were carried up the narrow staircase to the Chancellery garden. There, with Soviet shells still falling, Günscher, Linger, and others doused the corpses in gasoline and set them alight. Joseph Goebbels and Bormann observed the cremation. The fire did not consume the bodies completely, but the remains were hastily buried in a shallow crater. In the bunker below, silence followed. Goebbels assumed leadership, but he knew it was hopeless. That night, he and Magda poisoned their 6 children while they slept. The next day, May 1st, Joseph and Magda Goebbels stepped outside and committed suicide together. Martin Bormann attempted to escape, but was killed during the breakout. Others were captured by the Soviets, such as Krebs and Bergdorf, who also killed themselves soon after. The secretaries and lower staff mostly survived, taken prisoner by the advancing Red Army. So, who was in the bunker when Hitler died? At the core, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, ending their lives together. Joseph and Magda Goebbels, with their 6 children. Martin Bormann, Hitler's right-hand man. Generals Wilhelm Bergdorf and Hans Krebs, military leaders bound by duty. Adjutants like Otto Günscher and Heinz Linger, entrusted with Hitler's body. Staff members, secretaries Traudl Junger, Gerda Christian, and Elsie Kruger. Guards like Rochus Misch and Johann Rattenhuber. Hitler's cook Constanze Manziali, and others who kept daily life functioning. These were the final witnesses to the collapse of the Third Reich, trapped in a bunker that had become a tomb for a dictator and his dreams of conquest. In the end, the bunker was more than just a shelter. It was a stage for the last act of Nazi Germany. Inside its concrete walls, illusions crumbled, loyalties were tested, and the reality of defeat set in. The people who were there, whether out of devotion, duty, or lack of escape, shared in that downfall. Some would die within hours, others would face years of captivity, but all of them became part of one of history's most infamous endings. And so, when we ask who was in Hitler's bunker when he died, the answer is a mixture of loyalists, servants, and family members. A microcosm of the Nazi state itself. Fanatical leaders, devoted followers, and ordinary staff caught up in the machinery of destruction. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler ended his life in that underground room. With him died the regime he had built, leaving behind ruins, devastation, and a world forever changed. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch the one about what happened to Hitler's inner circle after World War II, and like and subscribe to not miss future history content.